we and as a council to the principles of integrity and respect, and to upholding the vision and values we have adopted in our long-term plan strategic document in order to energise, unify and enrich our district.
Thank you, Councillor. Can I call out Marini? Do you have any apologies? Mayor Bain will be joining us later. He's had to attend a Wellington Water Committee meeting and needed a quorum for that, but he will come back shortly. So can I ask for Councillor West, can you move please that the latest apologies of the Mayor be accepted and do it?
I move that.
Thank you, Councillor. Any conflicts of any acknowledgements of tributes?
Just like to mention that a past councillor, Bob Kirkland, passed away a week ago.
Okay. Take note of that. So, moving on to public participation. And our first up is Vivek and Tom and Ray from the Waikato Dark Sky Association. If you'd like to take the table at the end, I just remind us, our visitors, that the small is very difficult to hear. So if you speak up, that'd be great.
We are.
Sorry?
We are.
That's all right. Suzanne will ring the bell at 4 minutes and again at 5 to just remind you of the procedures. So, welcome and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Yeah, tēnā koutou katoa. It's great to be here. So, I'm Viveka. I am the chair of the Wairarapa Dark Sky Association, which we just changed the name to at our AGM, so no longer Martinborough Dark Sky, so it's just acknowledging that we are now Wairarapa Wide, which is really great. What we wanted to do here today is just thank Council for the support it's given to this stage of the project. We're now looking at hopefully going out for public consultation for the changes to the lighting ordinances, rules, whatever you like to say. And we really want to say thank you to the officers, to all of the people, and especially Council for being supportive of the project and also for helping with the inventory, the lighting inventory, which is part of the criteria for the reserve application. So we are very supportive, as you can imagine, of the proposal for the plan change, and we're also very supportive, and we believe the plan change process has been really good today. So thank you for big thank you for that. We think that the changes that have been put through in the plan change, in the draft plan change, are not onerous for public or anybody else, businesses. They will ensure that we meet the criteria. They're definitely going to meet the criteria for International Dark Sky Association, and they have actually given us feedback, which I think is in the report, and they were very impressed with the changes that have been put forward, so that is really good to hear. So I think we're also working very closely with various government departments and agencies, DOC, NZTA, Maritime New Zealand, and talking to iwi and others. So we're doing as much as we can to help to enable this plan change to go through reasonably smoothly. So I don't think I need to say anything else, otherwise it's a really exciting day to get to this stage. And if there's any questions, Ray is here, Ray Lilly and Tom Love. Tom's actually doing all of the application to the IBA, so he's the expert guru on that. So if there's any questions that you want to ask us, then we're open for questions. Thank you.
Councillors, any questions? Thank you, Councillor.
Kia ora, thank you for your presentation. Are you going to be having any kind of like initiatives to engage kids into the dark skies?
That's certainly on the agenda, and I mean, there's one concrete thing right now actually, which is working with Karanui High School to involve some science students in some of the dark sky data that we need to analyse. So certainly that kind of engagement is something that we're keen to do more of. And also younger children as well.
Becky Bagman, who is one of the committee members, she is going and doing some education at Aratoi as well as some of the schools. I know she's been at Maryborough School and she's obviously looking at others. So all of that sort of stuff is happening now, which is great. But as Tom said, the interaction or the work that we're going to be doing with Karanui is really exciting, and Simon Fuller is very excited about that.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for that presentation. Have you got any time frames about when you hope to have all the application completed?
We're proposing to have the application in by the end of February, so the International Dark Sky Association has a quarterly cycle. We're aiming for the end of February and March, so I would expect by April we would have a tick.
Between now and then, we have to produce about a 200-page report to them, detailing all of what we've achieved and what we're doing, and they then have to tick it off.
And also the Dark Sky Association, International Dark Sky Association, have changed their times when they actually, so we were aiming for later in the year, but those have been sort of changed, and also COVID's come into a bit of, and so everything's been extended somewhat. So realistically, I think, yeah, we have to be looking at the end of February.
All that's good.
Yeah, oh yeah, we're, keeping pedal on the pedal off, foot on the pedal on the gas.
Thank you very much, Viv, and your team.
No worries, thank you.
Thank you. Next we have Daphne Gessler. Daphne, welcome. Prior to the presentation and question time. Thank you. I think that paper's been circulated to. Yes. Thank you.
I'm going to stand up. I usually sit and read a tome to you, but today I'm actually throwing that away and winging it. But I just have a few questions for council, and I've got a handout there. And I just want to go back to June 2019, the funding for the playground. And this is the document that was in the council papers. The Waihinga Trust had 307,000 available to fund the project, and they'd already spent 17, we're not sure on. The tower was going to cost 60,000, it was being donated by Lions and Trust House, and they wanted to spend 16,000 on water play items, and we're doing community fundraising. And in addition, they had some really nice, generous flying saucer, bike stands, barbecue, all donated, totaling 55. So in fact, that was about a $450,000 project. In that meeting, they said that the funding was sufficient to complete the project. So all very well and good. And the contract, the winning contract's attached. It's a little bit strange in that it has no measures, no unit costs, and big chunks of money like 50,000 for grass, 26,000 for garden beds, with no measures or unit costs. A little strange, but no one can add it, it all got passed. So, chug along, and during the project, progress, seemed to be no progress reports, and I questioned this and told staff were visiting the site, making phone calls and sending emails. So a bit strange that there's no actual project documentation on a $450,000 project, but hey. And we were told in December that the project was completed, or nearly completed. Again, no reporting, I think, has been given to council, so I asked for the final project report and financials and got nothing. I then sent an OAI request, and after the mandatory 20-day wait, I received the attachment, page 3. So just a few minutes just to quickly look at this. First of all, there's no mention of the $17,000 spend that was in the first document. The contract is now $309,000, not $306,000. But there was a savings, good news, there was a savings of 13,000 in variations. But it means that 15 grand is left in the Waihinga Trust account or the project account, all good. You would expect variations to be documented. Oh yeah, so the next one's documenting the variations. A post and rail fence, softball matting, and reinstate original equipment. So variations of 16 grand, which doesn't kind of gel with $13,000 savings. Okay, never mind. The Playco Tower, the tower was funded 60,000, that's great. A new item for a water pump, 13,000. Okay, you get things of variation. So another 73. So the total cost of the project comes in at 385. We then say, where are the funds coming from? Well, the 200,000 that was Payne Farm is there. You can look at the bottom. The 107 that the Waihinga Trust had, they only spent 92, so they've still got 15 grand left, so that makes sense. But we've suddenly got 30,000 from Eastern Central Trust. Wasn't documented. Remember, the funds that were shown in June 19 were sufficient to complete the project, but they've gone for another 30,000. Usually those funds are tagged for something, but it doesn't seem as if it's tagged for anything. There's 43,000 from the community board. Again, wasn't mentioned in June, but the community board fronted up with 43,000. And where's the 50, 40, 50, 60,000 from Lions? And where's the Trust House grant? It's not shown in here at all. Then we get to South Warrappa, who chucked in another 20,000 for trees. Well, there's 11,000 in the project trees, so I guess we've now got 19,000 trees. They reinstalled the playground equipment. That obviously wasn't identified early on because it's an additional cost, but they're funding it, so it's fine. And softball matting, which was 25 grand, and the original went up to 2. Not sure why they weren't actually included in the project cost, which was a savings of 13,000, but now we've got additional that South Warrappa's front. So you can see, I had a few questions. Just like, and probably very simple answers, very obvious answers. So I contacted the audit committee and they felt they couldn't answer, didn't want to meet with me. So I phoned somebody else on the audit committee. They didn't think they wanted to meet with me. I contacted 3 Martinborough councillors. They might have wanted to meet with me, but they didn't respond. So I have some questions. Does anyone care about the lack of financial rigour brought to this project? And is this really a window into how council manage finances? Are you happy with the quality of an OAI response? And does anyone want to sit down with me and go through this and see if we can actually have some learnings, address any shortcomings and look at it in a bit more detail? Thank you.
No. Any direct questions from councillors? No.
Thank you very much, Daphne. I did receive your email. Unfortunately, you wanted to meet this morning and we've had meetings. So that's why, yeah.
Anytime, give me a call. That's what I've said in all my emails. If you are interested and you want to delve a little bit deeper, which I think maybe needs delving a bit deeper, yep.
Just a quick question. Thanks, Stephanie, for coming up and bringing this to our attention. What, at the end of the day, is it that you're wanting to really achieve by doing this?
I would love to have confidence that there's good financial rigour, there's good project management rigour, that if we're spending 450,000, we've got ongoing project reports, we've got variation reports, we've got risk reports, we know how we as a community are spending community money.
Thank you, Stephanie.
Thank you.
Just really quickly, one more. The questions that you were only very briefly able to ask at the very end, are you able to get those sent through so that way we actually have them and we can get some answers? Is that possible?
Oh, you mean all of the financial questions?
The questions that you said that,
well, the 3 questions.
And that you know, what your outcome or you know, what you want to just
I'll send it to email through tonight.
And I think this was
Thank
a useful forum in talking about something and everybody can leave.
Thank you. Now we have a late one from Big Finland. welcome, thank you for coming along.
Thank
You
you.
have 5 minutes and give us a bit of time for questions at the end. Thank you.
I'll try to. Thank you for the opportunity to address councillors on the, I don't know if I'm jumping the gun or not, but I was looking at the community board minutes a while ago and I saw there's a proposed pedestrian precinct for Kitchener Street. And I'd like to bring your attention to the draft management plan for the square, Mount Square Reserve, which I was one of the people. There was probably about 20 of us met for years to produce this document. And the reserve management plan, I see it's still saying it's a draft in the council where you can go and get your documents on the website, but there you go. Any changes to the development to the town square centre shall comply with the plan, it says in the plan. It also states a need to strengthen the formal usual layout of Martin Borough and associated vistas, and to ensure that the square is integrated into the rest of the town. To ensure the historic characteristics of the square is maintained, the square being Soldiers Memorial Square, as Matey Higginson will always insist upon. On a purely personal and business level, our fuel tanker needs to travel through the square and back out to our site so that the tanker can discharge fuel. Now, if you're going to turn it into a precinct, that Ohio to Kitchener, that little bit to the square, that will put us out of business, won't it? Because legally, you can't have pipes, you know, the hoses the tanker fills us with, they can't go across anything. They must be close up. And that's why they go around the square and then back to us. Other businesses in Kitchener Street also need access for their trade. Every week we have big trucks like the Coca-Cola truck, the fruit court truck, the Tip Top truck. I don't know how they're going to get access if you pedestrianise that piece of land. Ohio Street is so narrow that if cars are parked on either side of it, you can't, 2 cars travelling along it can't do it, can't happen. It's too narrow. Fire station at St John's, I'm really concerned about that. Fire alarm goes up. If it's that end of town, they're going to have to drive through residential streets rather than down the main state highway to get out in 2 places. Yeah. Money machines. We've got no bank in town, so if you want cash, you go to the money machine. Anybody with disability, mobility problems would drive to outside the money machine, get out. But if you're going to pedestrianise that, they can't do that. Over Christmas, when I was depositing money in there, I went right round the square and came back on that side because I had lots of cash I wanted to get rid of. And I think it's going to be a big security problem. I believe you all need to really go back and read this, and especially the vision statement, which I think is pertinent. We worked long and hard to get this plan together. I can understand why people with fundraisers and events want to reduce the cost by transferring that state highway to
under your control, but I don't want our local businesses disrupted. And yeah, I think you need to look really carefully at it.
Any brief questions from council? Thank you very much, Ian. Thanks for coming along.
No problem.
Thanks, Eva.
And Bob worked on it too.
Let's finish off. Yeah, definitely. Right, so the dark sky presentation is actually on the agenda for later. Aware of, yes, we'll discuss later on. Harry, do you want any comment on Ms. Geisler's comments?
I've received a question and respond to them once we've got the questions.
And the same with Eva?
Well, the Eagles one's really simple to answer. There are no plans at all to pedestrianise that area either. There are no plans. There's been no recommendation made to council. So there was a submission from the Martinborough Business Association to the community board about this. There's been no recommendation from the community board to this council at all. So there are no plans to pedestrianise the area.
Well, because it's been brought up, am I allowed to reply?
Well, just letting people know. Yeah.
We'll come back. Can we
We'll
come back
to
to
you, okay. But I'm really just letting you know, there's been no recommendation to council at all to pedestrianise that area.
That it's something that's tabled at a community board
Yeah.
meeting.
Yep.
So it's in the wind.
Yeah.
Not at this stage.
Yeah.
Right. I see I'm going to be absurd. So we'll enjoy yourself. Thank you. So I'll pass the chair on to
Tell you what, all the other councillors were very polite.
Thank you. Councillor Hibbs. Right, assuming I'm on track here, we move to item A6, and the Māori Standing Committee report for the meetings. Any chairs that would like to discuss the community board to the Māori Standing Committee? Right. And moving on, extraordinary business. Do we have any items? Okay, we move to receive the community board.
Yes,
Committee meetings, moved by Councillor Jepson, seconded by Councillor Fox. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, carried. Extraordinary business. So then have we? All right. Oh, great. Sorry?
Your ordinary minutes.
Okay, so we also received, we propose that the minutes of the extraordinary council meeting held on the 20th of May 2020 are true and accurate record. So I'll move that. Councillor Fox, Councillor A. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
All those against, the motion is carried. And we also okay. So we will now have a proposal that the publicly excluded minutes of the council meeting held on the 22nd of July 2020 are confirmed to the public. We have someone move that. Councillor Jepson, second Councillor Plymouth. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
All those against, the motion is carried. And then subject, so now we've passed that the public excluded minutes of the council meeting held on the 22nd of July 2020 are a true and accurate record. So I'll move that. Councillor M seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. All those against, the motion is carried. So I'm just getting myself back into the groove here. Notice of the motion. Are there any notices?
Sorry,
No, no,
Mr.
no.
Minister, we've got 19th, from the 19th of August.
Sorry?
Minutes from the 19th of August.
Oh, right. We have a proposal for the minutes of the extraordinary council meeting held on the 19th of August, 2020, are a true and accurate record. Moved by councillor Plymouth, seconded by councillor Lorenzo. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. All those against, the motion is carried. Now we go to those motions. Lining up. Sure. I'm just going to use this for resources. Right. Do we have any notices of motions, Suzanne? No, I do not. So recommendations from the committees and the community boards. Item B1, minutes of the council committees. So we've already moved to the community board and multi-state committee minutes. So then I move to, we received the minutes of the Assets and Services Committee meeting held on 12th of August 2020. Moved by councillor Jepson, seconded by councillor West. All those in favour say aye. Aye. All those against, the motion is carried. Discussion on those. Still carrying on. Receive the minutes of planning, resolution to receive the minutes of the Planning and Regulatory Committee meeting on 12th of August 2020. Moved by very much councillor M, seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. All those against, the motion is carried.
Your Worship, could we actually go back to the council minutes for the 20th of May? Sorry, I've just lost my place there. There is one alteration to those minutes, please.
We certainly can do that. We'll do that now if you want.
On the 20th of May, under public participation, it should read there are no actions. So we've got actions from there, but it should actually say no actions. But as we do everyone presenting.
We'll adjust that.
Thank you.
Right. Recommendation 7 that we receive the table minutes of Marshborough Community Board meeting on 2020. Moved by councillor Maynard, second councillor Fox. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. All those against, the motion is carried. And then resolution 8 that we receive the minutes of Finance and Audit and Risk Committee meeting on the 20th of August 2020. Moved by councillor M, seconded by councillor A. All those in favour, aye. Aye. All those against, the motion is carried. So are there any discussion on any matters that have been raised through the those reports? We've had one from councillor Lorenzo, we have one from council minutes. No? Maybe not. Right, so we now have up to number C. C1. There we go. The draft Wairarapa International Dark Sky Outdoor Artificial Lighting Plan change for public notification purpose. C1. So we have a mover to receive the report. Councillor Fox, second Councillor M. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. All those against, the motion is carried. So we now have Ms. Yuri T.B. Donaldson. But first, a brief outline of what you're asking for us today.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good morning, councillors. So, as our earlier speaker indicated, this is a great day in terms of things coming to fruition. Proposed Wairarapa International Dark Sky Outdoor Artificial Lighting Plan change, which is aimed to support the Wairarapa Dark Sky Society and the accreditation, plus the need of the current rules within the district plan up to speed, both in terms of prime intent of controlling it's only natural that things change over time and lighting technicalities change over time. And so the plan change purpose is to meet that need and provide new standards through, which have been achieved through Debbie from Perception Planning, consulting with technical experts to produce suitable technical and modern requirements to control sky, glide, or evening light pollution. So if I was summing it up, it is a pragmatic approach in terms of to meet the current need and work alongside and support the Wairarapa Dark Sky Society. I don't think it's one that's been overcooked or overstretched. It's based around technical requirements in terms of lumens, measures for capping lighting. So I think it's a very feasible and pragmatic approach to suit the current needs. And we'll endeavour to answer your questions both in a generic way or any technical componentry and elements of the plan change itself or otherwise.
Yeah, sorry, Councillor Maynard. If you could
I was a town crier, I can do that, that's no problem. I was just curious what's been the reaction with regards to outdoor sports areas and their lighting, because I'm assuming that the artificial lighting that you're talking about is going to actually impact the rugby grounds and the, you know, throughout our district. So.
Take that one. So yeah, that was one of our big considerations when we looked at the plan change. Obviously this plan change only applies to new lighting or replacing lighting. It doesn't apply retrospectively. But what actually we've put in the plan change is a whole lot of provisions for sports lighting. So what that means is that there's a new permitted activity standard for lighting at recreational facilities. And that is a few things to comply with an Australian sports lighting standard, effectively. But what it effectively means is that hopefully it will actually be easier for sports facilities to be able to get lighting without the need for a resource consent. So they should be able to tick off those requirements for a permitted activity, and then it won't trigger a resource consent standard. What we've also done is put in the rural zone, commercial zone and industrial zone amendments to the building height rule for light poles at recreational facilities. So that provides an 18-metre pole height, which effectively means that instead of having a shorter pole and having to project light out and up to cover the same area, what you're doing is allowing a higher pole height so it can go directly down within. And so that means that a new sporting facility or a replacement lighting comes in, if you're needing to put up a new pole height, it is unlikely to trigger a resource consent requirement. And if you can meet all those standards, which our lighting expert who we engaged has done a lot of work with Sports New Zealand in relation to other plan changes across the country, and he is very confident that lighting designers or lighting providers for sports facilities would easily be able to take those requirements. So hopefully that answers.
So we can Councillor Fox, Steve.
Thank you. The questions that I had, one of them you answered, which is great. I was keen to kind of know, it was around the colour temperature and of lights being 3000 Kelvin or lower. What can we currently look at in our district right now that might meet that criteria that we can?
Street lighting.
All of that's.
Yeah, so all of that's been changed. So basically it's a change from that real kind of white light to the warm kind of orangey colours. And from what I have been told, basically the trend in lighting is to move that way as well. So all new kind of, like, it's just becoming more and more readily available, these lower Kelvin lights, because people are seeing the advantages of that it still provides adequate light, but it's just a softer kind of, light that's provided. So,
I've got one other question. So it's really setting with household security lights, which often point up, not down, and the whole timing elements with those. So we would expect that there would be a change under this proposed, or this rule here.
Yes, so there's an exemption, which is in one of those rules. So you've got, the rules are 3,000 kelvins, and that lighting should be directed downwards. Then it's an exemption to those rules if the lighting is provided for on a time or sense basis that only goes for 5 minutes. So it means, because if things are flashing for 5 minutes, it's unlikely to be causing a big effect. You know, we're looking at lighting which is on for a longer period of, a longer period of time, potentially through the night, that has those potential effects. So it means that people can still have their security lighting, and it doesn't, but what would be encouraging, and I know that the Dark Sky Society will be really working with to do this, is encouraging people to say, hey, you can still actually have your 3,000 Kelvin one, and you can tilt them down, and that's adequate security and things as well. But there is that exception if people still want the one that's a bit, lower.
Yeah, I saw that. I'm aware of a number of sites around the Wairarapa where people have security lights and they leave them on all of the time. So they override the sensor function, and they would immediately be a contravention of the rule here.
Yes.
I mean, sort of thinking about it from a regulatory point of view, managing that would be quite interesting, won't it?
Yeah, I mean, I suppose that as we've said, it applies to new lighting going forward. And I think, yes, there is probably an element in the sense of the regulatory and getting, but I think it's also about that education, getting people on board and just understanding, because to be honest, most people when they go to the might attend to buy lights and things just don't really think about the implications of things on the dark sky and how it's going to affect other people and things. So it's about that, and I think that I know the Dark Sky Society is committed to working with local retailers in the Wairarapa to maybe even produce a bit of a sticker or sign say this is a section which is all dark sky accredited lighting and things like that. So yeah, there'll be a bit of education work and things, and I think that's something that the council can think about in terms of the regulatory approach. But there is ways of that, rather than being very heavy-handed from the outset, that educational element of it as well. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Weston. Councillor, please.
Cool. And with regards to the purchases of lights, are you working with the likes of the Mitre 10s, the Bunnings, with regards to the recommendations that you would give to them on the selling of lights? Because you could pick up any light from any store.
You totally can. Yep. And that's what I was just saying before, the Dark Sky Society is going to be working with them. I think we've had some initial discussions. I know, for example, Connor Payne and Kershaw here is really committed to the project and is really keen to see what he can do to help out. So again, it's that education element that will come in as part of this plan change notification and things that can assist in that process, but also the ongoing effects. That it's not just a one-off issue plan change. It's, there is a bit of an obligation to inform people about what that's about and the applications that.
Councillor Clemenza.
Deb, in there you talked about the lighting in the sports grounds. What I don't understand, and can you clarify, you've specified 4,000 kelvins, but our street lights are 3,000 kelvins. So why would the sports grounds not? I know you're raising it and doing that sort of thing, but why wouldn't the sports grounds be 3,000 as well?
It's because of the level of lighting that's required for some of these sports. So these standards have various standards for the Australian standards that we're using as a guide, have various standards for different sports. So things like tennis and things need slightly brighter light. Talking to our expert, we had a bit of a discussion about the 3,000, 4,000, because it's possible to make it 3,000, but it could, at the moment, the technology is still moving towards that, so it's more expensive for sporting facilities and things at the moment. He thinks that within the next couple of years that will dramatically change. So the good thing about this plan change is that, and that might be a question that we have, is that we're doing it now because of obviously the dark sky accreditation needs to occur. So this could have happened if that wasn't the process of happening through that district plan review, that upcoming district plan review. The good thing about having that upcoming district plan review is that it actually provides us with an opportunity in 2 or 3 years when that kind of comes to the forefront, is to review how these rule changes are actually going. And there may be an opportunity to reduce it to 3,000 if we then think, oh look, the technology's become available and we think that's appropriate. So there's room for scope, but it's more the actual implications for the potential facilities at the moment, which is why we're comfortable with that.
Then going on from that, if I can do that, is that further down in the document where it says for outdoor sports lighting, you're looking at the requirements under the Australian standards. If they change, then will that override the earlier 4,000? So if they put in there that the Kelvins and the lights are 3,000, will that mean that the people have to comply with that if they're doing a new sports ground rather than what's in our annual?
So yeah, so the standards, I'm just trying to remember if they actually, sorry, I'm just, no, sorry, but they may not specify levels. I think they specify minimum levels. Yeah, I'm pretty sure, but I can double check and I'll clarify with you later.
Cool.
I'm pretty sure that what they do is specify minimum levels that are required for those particular sports. So you need so much for tennis and you need so much for. So in terms of an actual max minimum, they kind of reflect that. So that's kind of where we've gone on that basis. But the standards, they're probably unlikely to change because they're quite new anyway in the next while. But again, at the plan review, we'll have an opportunity to check that as well.
Okay, cool, thank you.
Councillor Eames and Councillor Vickery. Totally support the project. Just 2 quick comments. One, somewhat lighthearted on page 8 of the S&T lighting, we talk about the Department of Corrections. I'm thinking that's probably
yes.
I'm thinking it's a consideration. And they do have a plan for including the Forest Park. I'd be interested to know what it
Thank you very much.
on a somewhat less light project. In your report, benefits, I'll put on my Featherston hat and my heritage hat. I would think, and I think this was probably written beforehand, Kaki. I quite like the idea. I understand cultural, environmental. I think there's also a heritage history thing coming through here, which certainly with a Featherston hat on, I'd like to promote in my region. So if we could engineer that, I'd be very pleased. Thank you.
I mean, again, we're looking for all of the benefits and highlighting to the community so we can use that.
Great.
Councillor Vickery.
Again, my compliments, totally support. You've done a marvellous job here in making coherent additions to this quite lengthy document. I understand that if adopted, after consultation and if adopted, this will apply to new construction and new applications for building. Does it therefore follow that a lot of existing properties within the dark sky area, as designated in the appendix, including council properties, will be non-compliant? How do we manage that?
Yeah, so there's basically
Because the rules at the moment are very, there's one rule that is for 8 lighting, so it basically allows most lighting. So when lighting is installed, as long as it's compliant with the district plan at the time that it's installed, then it has effectively existing use rights. So it doesn't make existing lighting non-compliant at all. So that's that whole thing about it. It's only applying, it can't apply retrospectively, but it applies to new or replacement lighting. But again, that's that. We want to encourage people to volunteer, hey, come on board with this is a great idea.
It's the education aspect and encouragement.
Pardon?
Education and encouragement.
Yeah.
Councillor.
Thank you, my questions have been answered, thanks, and really support.
Councillor Plymouth.
Yeah, thank you. Look, I just want to come back to the sports one, just on one part of it, the automatic curfew between 10 and 7.
Yep.
I can't read anywhere in there that where there is an exemption for a particular sporting event or a cultural event, or how does the sports group or an organisation go about getting an extension to 10 p.m?
Yeah, I mean, what the basis on that is from most of the information available, which was downloading expert participated in most cases. 10 p.m. is pretty, not many people are really playing sport after 10 p.m. at night. But if there is, I mean, if that's a concern, then we can look into that in more detail. What would happen is that technically, if they needed an event, then it wouldn't. If you were going after 10 p.m., then it wouldn't comply with that permitted activity standard. So therefore, it would trigger the need for a resource consent for that. If you're concerned that there are sports facilities within the Wairarapa that have new lighting that wouldn't meet that 10 p.m, then we can look at it. And that's part of that submission process as well, that people might, if that's a concern, then we can obviously consider the implications of that.
So I'm sort of thinking, perhaps not so much sport, but the use of the racing for the concert that went for 3 days and these sorts of things that events. I'd like to see somewhere in there where there is a process to follow to get an extension to that 10 p.m.
Yeah, I'm just usually thinking it might this is just off the top of my head, and I might have to think it through a little bit more. But we may be able to add in the temporary activities, permitted activities section of the plan, something to do with lighting. But Russell and I can have a look at that and we can come back to you with that, because that would provide for, because most of those occasions are temporary activities anyway.
I'm sure the Dark Side of the Moon concert went beyond the amount of stadiums.
Councillor Plymouth, because we don't want it to be a barrier for it.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I think that might be the best way to deal with it. So we'll look into detail in that. But I think we can tweak something about it. Thank you.
Councillor Rees.
I definitely disagree with the fact that someone needs a resource consent for lighting. And the other thing is too, is that, you know, it doesn't just affect the South Wairarapa, it affects all of Wairarapa. And if you have a look at Solway and sometimes the use that place gets, it really does need to be taken into a bigger consideration.
Yeah. Councillor Gibbs.
Thanks, Deb. You did answer my question, but we are going to have another crack at this in the combined district plan, and that's when the Marsden Solway area will have a say on it.
It's Wairarapa, that's fine.
But
it's Wairarapa.
It's Wairarapa, that's fine.
So when the society came to council early on, and we've had that close relationship with them, part of the issue was, right, how do we get a international dark sky happening? And so a staging approach was mooted, and that led to consideration of a 1, 2, 3 step stage process. What we've taken up is a 2-stage approach, meaning what's the area indicated for the plan change will encompass territorial authorities of South Wairarapa and Carterton districts, with the core of the International Dark Sky Reserve being Aorangi Forest Park. stage 2 is for it to become feasible, is for Masterton to put serious consideration into lighting improvements within their boundary, so that the area of Masterton, or a portion of it, can become part of stage 2 for the International Dark Sky Reserve. And stage 3 could potentially be, because there has been some interest shown for the Dark Sky Reserve to extend into Taurua district. So there is potential there. But it's predicated on sorting out lighting issues, recognising lighting issues and taking active steps to mitigate it, both through a mix of plan change policy rules and working with using that encouraging approach for existing lighting that's in place.
Just to finish off, I was going to say, I mean, I put this into the category of Ramsar. I mean, we've got Ramsar for the lake, Moana, that's internationally recognised, and this is going to be internationally recognised. How many districts in the country have got two internationally, well, potentially two internationally recognised projects going on?
Councillor Clinton.
Debbie, just in the light painting, where you talk about the use of searchlights and things like that, is it possible to add in laser beams in there? Because a lot of people are using those things and they're going to affect people's night sky as well.
So the,
you know, using laser beams and things like that, rather than you've got lighting for things that are prohibited and things like that.
Do lasers come under the definition of lighting?
So no, so this applies to basically outdoor fixed lighting on properties. And then so the lasers that, are you meaning the little laser kind of key things?
People have much more sophisticated laser things now.
Yeah, they're all actually really heavily regulated. Apparently it's very, very hard to get approval to actually be able to use one. There's quite a few steps to go through. So they're actually quite heavily regulated through other means, so it doesn't need to be covered under the district.
Okay. Yep. Councillor West, do you have
No, fine.
I've got a question, if I may. So, should we pass this, and I'm going to say it's not, I'm going to bring it the answer, they approve the draft international and change the public notification. Does this satisfy the trigger for certification for the South Wairakā, or do we still need to wait until it's actually put into law?
So what will happen is that if you approve it for public notification, then we need to go to Carterton District Council next week for their planning committee to approve it for notification. Then it goes out to public notification. Then obviously we'll have a submission period, so submissions will be received from the public. Then we have to do further submissions, and then a hearing will be scheduled by the council, and that Russell might be able to provide a bit more detail about that. Then there's a decision from the hearings panel on that. And then there's an appeal period that we have to wait for, and then the council, it'll come back to the council to get basically signed off.
Yeah, it was for at what point do you then submit the Dark Sky to progress the South Wairakā portion of the certification? So it needs to be operative before you can put that forward.
You'd be giving updates to the society as we go, giving them obviously the summary of submissions and signal of the extent of issues that are raised up for us to deal with. So it's part of the informing process.
Yeah, and we're very hopeful that we're, given the timeframes that we're working to, that we'd be able to get a decision from the hearings panel prior to their, the appeal period may not have finished, but I think would be confident that given the process, we can get a decision from a hearings panel that they could go to the Dark Sky Society and say, we've got a decision. Yep.
Thank you. Councillor Plymouth?
Just on process, if we're going to say, go out to public notification at this stage for consultation on it, do we need to get because obviously we've raised some issues that you're going to go back and look at.
Yep.
Do we need to come back before then to say, yeah, now we're happy to send it out, or?
Well, it's up, I suppose it's up to your process. I can kind of basically sort those out in the next couple of days and send some information out to the council to see if you're satisfied with the response. I suppose the only risk with that is the delay in the process. If we're waiting for the next council meeting, I'm not quite sure when that's scheduled, unless we deal with it.
Or do we send it to, while you're making those changes, send it to Carterton and get their comments, and then we get a combined council, send it out?
You're going to get comments from public consultation that we haven't even thought about.
Yeah, I mean, I
So
suppose.
the recommendation is that you approve this, noting that these comments will be incorporated in this. But Councillor Jepson's comments that you like, you get a whole lot of things in here through the submission process that have been considered, and that's what the submission process is about. So, so get it out there, so you can actually get the feedback. You won't know about every contingency here. Get it out there.
Yeah, and as I said, we don't know what's going to come out of public submissions. And I think what's a really important thing to remember is that this is our draft, this is our best foot forward at the moment. We don't know what the public's going to say, and we have to be open to consider what the public says and potentially make changes through that process. And what happens through that process is we receive submissions, and then it's my job to really look at all those submissions and say whether or not I approve or reject, recommend in my professional opinion, what changes are made to the draft that we've got at the moment. So yeah, there is a bit of a process still to go through.
I'm assuming that all those submissions are going to be made available to the council.
Normal submissions process.
Yeah, no, it's the full process under the RMA, so it's all very transparent. We have to publicly notify the submissions received, and then all the further submissions, and then all of the subsequent.
So we've got a little bit of way to go, councillors, but certainly it's the first step part of public consultation. Do we have any other questions of Debbie or Ross prior to motion? No. Debbie, Ross, thank you very much for your presentation, and Debbie, well done for thinking on your feet, because you've been throwing a lot of very So what I'd like to do with people is propose that we approve the draft of International Dark Sky Outdoor Artificial Lighting Plan Change for public notification as part of the recent council initiated plan change. I'd like to make a slight adjustment here, with the expectation that comments raised will be addressed prior to public consultation.
Yep.
Okay with that? Yep. We'll propose. So Councillor Maynard, seconded. Councillor Hay, all those in favour say aye. Aye. All those against, motion is carried. Well done.
Good.
Great work.
Well done, guys.
Now I'm getting back to the group. We're going to move backwards to the B section. And now we have recommendations from the committees. So I'm going to go to two, which was considering moving to.
Are the heaters on?
Oh, I'm sorry, I'm going up.
It's absolutely freezing.
Going up. Sorry.
Waiting till Debbie finishes.
Minute pause.
Are they on a timer?
Yeah. Yep, they are.
Would you like a 10-minute break, councillors? Right, 10 minutes break. We'll reconvene at 11:15.
20 minutes.
Yeah, so it starts to feel cold. Councillor Fox has bought a pancake.
Yeah. Can we cuddle up?
Yes. I've got a whole bottle.
Right, so we are now going back to consider the recommendations from the three committees. So we've received the report, So we're going to go to Financial Audit and Risk Committee, which is P2. So Councillor Vickery chaired this meeting in Councillor Hayes' absence. So Councillor Vickery, would you like to speak to the recommendations that are here before us regarding the customer satisfaction survey?
Well, it's pretty much as written. We considered the worth and the cost of the current arrangements for customer satisfaction surveys, decided it required review, and it would be prudent not to incur that expenditure again, something that's probably not fit for purpose, and that we would defer conducting the survey until we've identified a suitable survey system or provider until early 2021.
Do you have any questions from the council? So in which case I'll immediately resolve to recommend the council to defer conducting the customer satisfaction survey until early 2021. We have a mover, Councillor Hayes, seconder, Councillor Vickery. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. All those against, motion carries. We'll now move to D3, recommendations from the Planning and Regulatory Committee. Of which there are 3. Councillor Vickery, would you like to speak to these recommendations as well?
Briefly, the first recommendation that we order a prohibition of alcohol consumption or possession of alcohol in public places in the period of 15 November this year, midday to 9 p.m. This is the Coast Martin. It's a rollover of every year's arrangement, and it's to prevent wanton drunkenness in public places and the spread of revelry.
Wanton. Wanton drunkenness. We're back in the 1600s.
Ignoring Councillor Albright. Yes.
Could that just be amended that is for, so somewhere that it actually says that it's for Toast Martinborough, because, you know, if it didn't, so.
Fair enough, if Toast Martinborough, well, the Toast doesn't have actually, then you can come back. That's what suggested.
If, you know, anyone wants to sit outside the open if Toast wasn't on, so.
Yeah, I'll just reword that at the time.
Thank you.
The next one. Any questions on that one?
No.
Recommendation 2 and 3 go hand in hand, and if there are any questions, I'll direct them to the Chief Executive, who obviously gets it a lot more than I do. But it's a resolution to pass land to for conservation purposes. It's to create an Esplanade Reserve, waive the requirement for an Esplanade Reserve, and to stop a portion of a road in the scenic area. Been the subject of much doing and throwing, and largely other teachers.
Do you have any questions for Councillor Vickery or for Russell regarding this? In which case we'll move to, I'll do recommendation 1 first and then 2 and 3 together. So we resolve to recommend that the council, that pursuant to clause 3.2 of the South Wharra Liquor Control Bylaw 2011, to order a prohibition of alcohol consumption or possession of alcohol in the public places as shown in Appendix 1 of the Office Report as an alcohol prohibition area. This prohibition is to be effective on the 15th of November 2020 from 12 to midday 9 p.m. subject to Toast Martin.
I'm sorry, Your Worship, through you, it's a conflict of interest for me.
Cool, that's fine.
Did not.
Leave yourself in that. All those, so we have someone move that.
You just don't say that final sentence again, sorry.
Subject to Toast Martinborough. Moved, Councillor Maynard, seconded, Councillor Hay. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. All those against, the motion is carried. And then we'll go to recommendations 2 and 3, which I will take as read. It's already been read by Councillor Ridley. Do we have someone move those two resolutions? Thank you, Councillor Fox. Councillor Plymouth seconded. All those in favour, please say aye. All those against, motion is carried. And then we'll go to agenda item B4, it should be. This is recommendations for the Assets and Services Committee. So we have received the recommendations. Judy, Councillor Chips, would you like to speak to this?
Look, it's pretty self-explanatory. I think the concern is that ratepayers are greyed out that it is a stormwater service and they don't want to be lumbered with the expense of maintaining the waterways and all the rest of it. But where it was left that the staff were going to look at the financial concerns, and Ewan's not here at the moment, but have you done anything, Karen? But I mean, it's been flagged, and what we're asking is, and the recommendation is it's considered. So
the background of this is that over time, the water race has been begun to be used for the council stormwater purposes. So the water race subcommittee is saying anything pertaining to stormwater should be done on the ratepayer, the water race. And that seems fair and reasonable. So it's considered by the Assets and Services Committee in the case of as expenses.
that's why you're on that committee, eh? You could have spoken to this.
No, you.
Well, so I say. So any other questions? So in which case
I'll move.
You'll move the recommendation 1 as read.
Yep.
So move seconded, Councillor Fox. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
All those against, the motion is carried. So I'll pass back that, and then we can move forward to C2, which is committee appointments. So we're now considering report C2. The council needs to formally appoint our iwi and marae members to the multi-standing committee to meet legislative requirements. But we asked the iwi, marae and Pāti Maukai to nominate someone that they want to represent their interests. In this case we have a nomination from the Hauriki Marae. We have a mover to receive the report, Councillor Fox, seconded Councillor Maynard. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, the motion is carried. So do we have a mover to appoint?
I'll move that we appoint Tony Kerr as Hauriki Marae, member on the Marriage Steering Committee.
Seconded Councillor Plymouth. All those in favour, please say aye. Those against, the motion is carried. I know Tony Kerr. I know Tony Kerr personally. I think she's an excellent appointee.
Very impressive with that first reading. Yeah.
We're now moving on to C3, Positive Ageing Strategy Implementation Plan. Do we have a mover to receive the report? Councillor Gibbs.
Surely there's a conflict of interest here, isn't there? Emotionally carried.
So we've got Lisa Matthews, Council, and to remind us where we're up to with the positive ageing strategy and what we're being asked to support today.
Kia ora koutou. As Alex, I knew him in another life. As the Mayor said, my name is Lisa Matthews. I'm the new Regional Positive Ageing Strategy Coordinator. I'm also a new Wairarapian as well, and have been here for a year. My background is in community engagement and have worked in the community for a number of years, both in local government, national government, and actually in the community itself. I guess I'm delighted to be in this role and to be supporting this work, so very exciting. Just a quick refresher, because this was approved last year and I understand that you're a new council. So it looks like this, and it was developed and approved by South Wairarapa District Council last year. It was developed really to reflect the fact in 2035 1 in 4 people living in Wairarapa will be over 65. And that's going to be an increase of 79%. So quite a large amount. So really about getting ready for that time and in creating a place and spaces that are age-friendly for an ageing population. Now, the strategy was actually developed with a huge community engagement last year and the year before, both amongst older people themselves, community organisations that work with older people, and also with council staff and council members. So it has a strong background of to get us to this place. And the key thing about it is it's really around making sure that our older people, our kaumātua, lead valued, connected and fulfilling lives. So principles based on positive narrative around ageing, working together on what already exists, ensuring equity and cultural diversity are the principles. And it has 6 goals, really around community health and support services, communication and engagement, transport, housing, cultural diversity, places, spaces and activities. So the work of the implementation plan that you have in front of you and approved, thank you very much, is really, it has 2 foci. One is actually business as usual, and that is around actually taking what already happens and just applying a senior lens to adapt. An example of that is the website development that is happening here. It's actually about including older persons in the testing for that new website. That's an example. And of course, the implementation or the installation of low impact gym equipment in outdoor parks, that's also something that is BAU, but actually supports this strategy. There are some special projects that will have to be developed, things like accessibility audits of buildings. So bringing in professionals that will audit some council buildings and see whether they are actually accessible for our older people. So there are some separate projects, but the great thing about it is really around the fact that so much can be achieved through business as usual and just applying that senior lens. So that is a quick once over of the strategy. Is there any questions?
So part of the feedback we got last year and the year before was around training for elderly, particularly with lack of banking in the district, increased use of internet banking, the possibility of no checking, etc. And I know a lot of work's been done, but I just couldn't find in here.
No, and actually what we were doing in that instance, and we are already doing, is supporting organisations like Digital Seniors to provide this work. It's not in work with council to provide training, but we can actually support other organisations that are in this space and doing that work. And I think Digital Seniors is around the strategy. Yeah. So that, yeah, it is. You just have to unpack it a little bit. Yes, yeah, yeah.
So one question I've got just for clarification. 65, is that in alignment with the retirement age, and will that change at any stage?
It is in line with the retirement age. Will what change?
The age, because the retirement age is going up to 67, I believe, at some stage.
It hasn't been officially approved.
It hasn't been approved yet, but will that change?
Sharon will cross that bridge.
Yeah.
But I think at the moment it's still
yeah. The national strategy actually looks at that, looks at the sort of 10 years before as well, because actually you're moving into that aging. So taking that kind of 65 will have some elasticity around it over time.
The interventions that we're going through the plan obviously aren't age specific, so they will help disabled people, they will help people who are in the 60s.
Yeah.
Like me.
We're talking 70s, Gary.
So it's not the only people who can use this access.
That is absolutely a key point. Some of the work around accessibility will of course support people with impairments and also support parents with prams, etc., etc. So you are getting a bang for
Councillor Cleaver.
work.
Lisa, I see in here there's a lot of a lot of information for seniors or a lot of work with seniors around where they have internet access, but we have a lot of seniors within our community that are not computer literate, they don't have devices, they don't have smartphones, but I don't see anything in there that will bring them into the conversation and things like that. How are you covering those off?
So there's a section on communications and engagement, and so that is working across council communications to make sure that they are done in a number of different ways, and that already happens through website, Facebook, and also the use of community newspapers and things like that.
Don't get those things. So whatever.
They will get the local community weekly paper. So what I'm saying is that there already are a number of different things in place for getting messages across. But we will be looking, one of the projects is looking at our communications and making sure that they are accessible across a range of different ways. So that is a project that is in there, in the strategy. Yeah.
Actually, Annette, I'd just like to introduce Annette as our new library manager. Of course, one of the key things we want to do is digitisation and make our libraries more accessible for just that kind of thing. So we want to comment how some of our physical service could advance training, supporting people to become digitally connected.
Lisa and I have got a meeting scheduled for next week. I'm very new into the job, as she is. One of the key things, of course, that public libraries do in the country is they're central hubs for digital literacies and technology literacies. The 4 libraries in the Wairarapa Library Service have done a number of bits and pieces around augmenting people's skills around digital and technology, but they could be doing a lot more. So we're really in discussions with some external providers that we might partner with to do a whole bunch of new things in the coming year or so. But we've also got to have a conversation and see what is possible and then see what people want. So picking up on that, yes, in South Wairarapa, there is big pockets of low connectivity and just opportunities to learn and to play with technology and get familiar with it. So libraries have got a really huge role and opportunity to get involved in that and help in that communities.
So I'm really interested in the comments that I'm hearing about low connectivity and so on and so forth. And I'd be really interested to know how you gauge that. I've never seen a survey about this, and I can only talk for myself that every person I know from my parents' age group are all connected. So until we can actually define the problem, it's very easy to say, oh, there's these big pockets, but where are these big pockets?
To be honest, there's a lot of research done in this area and there's a lot of information online. It does show where the risk areas are and that it's not a blanket. So your experience probably isn't.
No, I completely agree with you, but I'd like to see this sort of information.
The guidelines you find the whole time. Karen, you had something?
So I can actually answer that. So there's been a national survey that indicated that 10% of New Zealanders are not digitally connected. So it's a lot larger than you would think. You know, that was a very recent problem with the authority stuff.
So I think
but there is
just hold that there. Karen, you have a quick
Sorry, this is just research, very recently published by the CAD, and I can send that out to you.
That would be fantastic.
That would be great.
But Alistair just saying the census asks those 3 questions each year, and in a sort of roundabout way, the low turnout with the census may well point to.
Okay. No, but we take this point, but it's out.
Well, I acknowledge it's out there, but I'd like to get a gauge on how big this problem is.
But going back to it as well, there's a lot of community groups, like one we funded recently, Wisdom of Wellbeing, that are targeting specifically addressing aged people. How do we connect to those to make sure that they are furthering our goals as a council in our strategy?
So part of that strategy, part of that conversation would be about personally me connecting with them, but also there are, and I'm wondering about whether there's options in the funding criteria around strengthening their connection to this. but also through the reporting process of, with funding, that you would ask those kind of questions.
Could I just make one other point about this age thing? And I completely agree with the strategy. I think it's great. But I would say one of the biggest handicaps we have in South Wairarapa is the state of our footpaths. This came across very clear during the election when I was walking through Greytown. A lot of our elderly do not go outside because they are scared of falling because of the state of our footpaths. And I can guarantee you that when I was on my crutches and walkers, we are not a connected town. None of our towns are. And I think we need to really focus on this above other things, because that is going to make a significant difference to our elderly people and our infirm people and our
everybody.
I think there's a couple of things there, Alison. We did discuss this quite a lot in the annual plan.
Yeah, I know.
We did put more money towards footpaths, and we have their long-term plan. So I think we're addressing it on that front.
I just want to make the point there. Oh yeah, I agree with that.
That's where that's where that easy solving is, that actually just applying that senior person's lens to that repair schedule. And so looking at places where older people may go, so you would maybe prioritise the footpath outside the local doctor's surgery versus a footpath somewhere else. So that's actually, and I have a meeting with Tim this afternoon actually to discuss that very thing. So, but footpaths came up everywhere as an issue.
And it's lighting for footpaths. We know that we've got lighting on one side of the street and we've got footpaths on the other. So it's all this whole connectedness that just is not quite right.
Councillor, any other questions on this?
I was just going to suggest in terms of people, the ageing population not on the internet, there's going to be less and less as people age, because the generation below me are computer savvy, and as they come through,
I didn't want to mention that. I didn't want to mention that. That's a bit morbid. You can, Jimmy, you're close to me.
Through our needs and connectivity, and by area, led by Mia and Pearson. And I think there's some big strides being made on fibre, certainly, but I think there's also those rural and outliers that we still need to address as part of our long-term plan. I'm just going to say this, it's fantastic that you are providing us with a lens over this and making sure that we're on track to achieve our goal.
Yeah.
Thank you. So with that, I'd like to propose the recommend that we endorse the South Wairarapa District Plan Positive Aging Strategy Implementation Plan. Thank you very much, Councillor Colenso, seconded by Councillor Hay. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. All those against, motion is Hold 5.
Good shot.
This next one's quite interesting. In fact, we might continue. Item D1, the community wellbeing update reports. We have a movement to receive the reports. Councillor Vickery, seconded. Councillor West, all those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Okay. Motion is carried. Mr. Stitt, is you here? No.
Ewan's got home with a migraine. Glenda's view, so I'm up here to make sure that you're reasonable and treated us.
Kia ora everybody, my name is Linda Sibyl. I am the Community Development Coordinator for Patterson East South Wairarapa District Council, so it's a split role 2020. I actually started in the middle of lockdown, which was really interesting. I got my laptop dropped off at my letterbox and they said go forth and do, which was an experience. The following week they put me into the EOC, and having no emergency operation knowledge or any experience, I got put into the welfare sector, and that was me for the next few weeks. So by the time I came into the offices, we were well and truly into my role, and that was my so a little bit of history about me is I've been born and bred in the Wairarapa, worked in Masterton at a non-profit organisation doing community development and youth development for the last 6 or 7 years. So I took on this role. It was really exciting because, as you guys know, we haven't had the community development coordinator in South Waitangi before. So really new role for you guys. And I thought to start with, it might be easy to just identify what community development is not. So it's not buildings, strategy, comms, parks and reserves, amenities and libraries. So there is components of community development in these spaces, but it is not the main focus of community development. In its simplest form, community development is about relationships, shared experiences and working together. It's everyone working together to make our communities a really good place to be, grow up, live in, and everything else in between. Community-led development is slightly different. It is about fostering communities to thrive and be strong, resilient spaces. So rather than being seen and seeing themselves as clients or recipients of services, local residents are the heart of it. They know their community and they want to be a part of developing their community. So an example of that is over lockdown in Featherston, a group of organisations identified a problem and worked together to address that. So that was Whānau Trust, Paiti Mōkai, Fab Fedi and Food Bank. There was some food issues. Going forward, what we're hoping to achieve is that if any emergency, any family that's in need, they've got the space, they're producing local product, they're storing their local product and they're supporting the community. And that is a really great example of community development, sort of identifying the need, doing something as a community and addressing it. Where that sits in local government is around how councils work with the community to create and achieve locally owned visions. So building on what the community already has and progressing that in small steps. Communities need to own their change and lead where possible. So local body enablers are there to support, connect, advise, guide, resource, inform and leverage. So by us being able to value the knowledge of the community that have their own experience and visions, local government can operate from a strength-based approach. That sits really well within the Wellbeings. So with the Wellbeings Act that came into force again in 2019, the role of local government is to promote community wellbeing, working in partnership with communities to identify and articulate their wellbeing aspirations. Sorry, I'm not a very good public speaker, so I've got notes. So Wellbeings encourages attentive engagement and participation, which enables council roles to be facilitators rather than providers of service. And it also enables community ownership and capability and decision making based on the impact of wellbeings. So the shift to wellbeings means that we need to put our focus on people, so people are the centre of everything that we do, and we can measure our progress on lifting people's quality of life and how we support the things in the community that they care about, such as health, environment, resilience and social connections. So with the long-term plan coming up, now's a really good time to be thinking of the wellbeings and what impacts council can have in that space going forward. It shouldn't be a tokenistic gesture. COVID-19, the lockdown, it really highlighted the social connections that council had within the community and what support was provided by the councils over that time and what the ongoing support is going to be needed for our community going forward. So examples of that is that the income relief payment ended yesterday for the 1st of September and approximately 70 people across the Wairarapa are going on to job seekers benefits this week. So what's that impact is that going to have in our community? There's only 29 jobs advertised in South Wairarapa at the moment, so we need to start looking at and weighing up those options. I think I skipped too far. This is wellbeing slide. Snapshot of your community groups, what's happening in the community. So over the last couple of months, I've just been going out and talking to a whole lot of community groups, finding out who they are, what they're doing. What I have done is just done a little snapshot of your 3 towns. I haven't gone out to rural, I haven't gone out to coastal yet, so they're not included at this stage. But community development in South Wairarapa is going to be huge. It's so vast. There's so much space, so many different towns.
And the towns are so different as well. So Featherston is really connected, really community-minded, really community-led driven. And a lot of that comes from the fact that you've got FabFeedi in there, which is some funding. They got funded by the DIA through a community development fund. So there's 5 years of people in the town really connecting, really driving that community development space. Greytown's very much focused on the history, the look and the development of their town, and a lot of the groups, their focus seems to be connected around that space. And then in Martinborough, what I noticed is that all of the groups just get on and do it. They don't, you can't find them. If you Google one of the community groups, you can't find them. But they're all out there and they're all working. And I found the best place to get connected with the community groups is to go to the cafe in town, and people will go, oh, you need to talk to that person and that person and that person, and that is how I've met a lot of the community groups in Martinborough. So one of the things that we start doing in Martinborough is we're going to hold a community morning tea at the library and start to get these groups to talk to each other and communicate and find out who they are, and by putting it out there we might be able to start to paint a picture so that if you've got new residents moving into Martinborough, they can just jump on Google and have a look, and they'll have a list of who's in the community, and that sits alongside the work that Amy's doing in the comms and the website as well. We'll start to develop a community space on your website. While the stuff is all great, it's just the surface stuff, so it doesn't show the bigger picture of what the social issues are in our community, and we need to start formulating a picture of what the underlying issues are. So currently you've got 300 people on the job seekers benefit and 585 people on other MSD benefits, and like I said, 27 jobs available. There's a lack of local social services in the Wairarapa. The need for food is increasing, crime rates are there, employment opportunities, they're not there, and then you've got affordable and social housing. So South Wairarapa has 21 families on the social housing register at the moment, and they're all deemed an A priority, which means that they're considered at risk of having severe and persistent housing needs that need to be addressed immediately. So these are other parts of the community development where we really need to start thinking in that space around what is council's responsibility in that. Developing partnerships, supporting existing groups, resourcing and advocating for change is some of those options. So as I've been going around, there's been some comments that have been made around the relationships in and out of South Wairarapa District Council. I think a lot of the conversation has just been that they just don't know where to go, or they find that one person at council and they just grab onto that person. That person said yes once, so I'm going to try and keep that person saying yes once. Some people are trying to go through community boards and then to council. Others are going straight to the governance level of council. There's not a lot of structure. So that's one of the things that's come through, and it's one of the things that's quite easy to put in place and make some changes to. The gaps and opportunities was the coolest part. There are so many people in your community that know what they want, how they want it, and are excited about giving someone in this space to work with them. So, like I said, with the gaps before, I think we need to spend probably another 6 to 12 months really doing a great scoping of the whole of the South Wairarapa, going out to the rural communities, the coastal communities, and finding out exactly where everyone's sitting and what they're at. And then you will really start to formulate a really good picture of what is happening in the South Wairarapa. But the opportunity side of it was pretty cool. One of the things that I really liked and I think would be quite cool to do is the town plans. And so every town has a community-led plan. It's there alongside the community boards. the community boards then have some structure around people coming in for funding. So that's, that sits within their community plan, but it'll also help the council with their long-term plans and their annual plans, because all the towns have their views and their ideas of what they want to do and how they want to do it. Yes, what is that? Yeah, supporting vulnerable communities to reach their potential, strengthen the connection between Māori and iwi. So I think you've got the Māori Standing Committee, and I haven't been to a meeting yet. But coming into long-term planning, are we ensuring that their voices are coming into the long-term plan? Are we, yeah, is it connected? Add to that?
Yes, look, this is a really important conversation. You're doing really well, I'm really nervous person. So we're going to go into the LTP, and this is an area of council's future that we, for a variety of reasons, have not resourced or supported. And so Glenda's been doing essentially a journey of discovery, and it's telling us essentially that there are some communities are more strongly connected than others. There's a lack of information about what is available in local communities unless you live here and talk to people. There's not an active process of disseminating information. Remember things the old community advice bureaus used to do? You know, but the key role here is that this is not about council doing things, it's about connecting parts of communities together and finding out where there's a naturally resilient and working part of the community, but where there are gaps. And one of the hard things in here is there's actually not a lot of, so in the economic development area, you have strong indicators like GDP, employment rates and those types of things. So you've got a real sense, an economic sense, about how well the economy is. You don't have anything like that in this area at all. Some usual proxy indicators, but don't actually, what they will tell you is individuals' experience like employment. They don't tell you the things that Glenda's talking about, is how well the sector is actually coordinated and integrated to respond to the needs of the government. And that's really the journey that we have to take. So ask some questions of Glenda, but really we're going to pick this up very strongly in the LTP workshop this afternoon. There's an element of where do we want to go with this. Because this is, in the context, if you think of the local government reform, this is being signalled by the Minister and the government as being something they're really expecting local government to up its game on. So, as Glenda's giving you a taste of it, we're finding stuff, where do you start? You know, and what's
I mean, if I can say, Glenn, this is fantastic. So you just started out, we haven't had this role in the council for a while. What I'm seeing in what the community is saying about and gaps and opportunities, it looks to me about 60 to 70% of it is communication. So is this, do we have the capability or we get a plan to have the capability in council to up our game here as well?
I mean, you're going to have to have this discussion, but I think one of the critical areas of information we don't provide is community information. So who's doing what in the community? We don't actively, people phone us, we have no system to refer. You know, so if you took one practical step, we'd be making sure that our front end of our inquiry system, whether it be in our libraries, whether it be here at Waihinga Centre, that we actually actively start channeling community information as part of council's service, as opposed to that's something someone else does over there. Because we don't do it, and people can't find their way through the maze.
Cool. Councillor Hay. I think you've done a great job. One thing, just thinking about what you just said, Harry, is certainly the libraries act as a bit of a focus. But in Greytown, we do have a list of all newcomers. It's over 50 years.
Yeah.
That, and last year we had a community voluntary community organisations one day meeting, and I think 45 groups there, the high attendance.
Yeah.
So, but it's just often for new people in town, what's their first stop, of where they can get integrated into those.
And it is like, and this is where Greytown, you've got those flyers and you've got that information. It's the same thing with Featherston, you can jump on Featherston and Google, and you can get connected to Facebook pages and groups. And Martinborough, it's very much just word of mouth. Yeah, good underground network.
In the conversation, it'd be great if we keep it at a macro level, not micro, because I'm sure this is the first step of the journey of community engagement, which is fantastic. I think as well, people, if we do know groups that aren't included on this, we can add those to help fill that out.
And the last slide is just from here. Sorry, so we just got community development, scoping exercise, develop a 5-year community development plan for South Grove District Council. We want to achieve in the 5 years. Work with the community boards and the community development town plans, and incorporate wellbeing as a long-term plan, and partnerships and services are a major thing within the wellbeing. So partnering with organisations is huge. So keep that in mind. I think you've done that really well with Whānau Trust. And
Just as an interesting point, and it's a pity that COVID-19 came along and hit us in the back of the head, Featherston has an expo event.
Yes. Yeah.
And that usually brings out quite a few groups.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah, I think we look at how that and then you can recommend for other towns to be following that. Cool. Any questions, councillors?
Sorry, just one question. Any possibility of maybe funding to have just a very simple website with 3 towns, or start by Rathbone, where people might find
We'd be better to do it if you either set something aside or you try and channel all through the same place. So we've actually been doing some work and we've actually provided and that's certainly part of the build. But the key thing is you decide what you're involved with, and that's discussion has to be on TV. You're active in this area and also the last thing we need is Linda, who's only half time, being the person that everyone forefinds every time they want to know something, but it's just a possible waste of her time. And her role is to try and really give good advice to council about where the strengths of the community are, where the gaps are, and what are the options we need to address them through a public participatory process like those things. That's what community development is about. And it makes it even positive aging as well.
Great. Thank you very much. Right. Now moving on to item T2. We've got great do we have a mover to receive the report? Councillor Miller, seconded Councillor Vickery. Councillors? All those in favour, please say aye. All those against, the motion is carried. So who have we got, Mr. Wilson, to talk on this report? We have Mr. Wilson himself. So let's just.
So Ewan's got home.
Are we going to, let's move on, because I quite like to get into the stuff before lunch, as opposed to just wait for lunch and then finish off the couple. We'll come back to this. Right? So we've already received it. So at D4 action items, do I have a mover to receive the reports?
Yep.
Councillor Fox, second Councillor Jefferson, all those in favour, aye. Aye. All those against? Motion is carried. So, councillors, are there any questions you'd like to ask the officers from action?
Well, I did have one number 14, but I see you is obviously not here. Just see where we are with Sutherland.
I think just wait for Harry to come back.
Are we at the Lake Edge or?
No, we're on.
No,
action report.
So we've got the action report for come back to the action report, once Wellington Water arrives. But that's going to just see while Harry comes back, because I think he'll be out.
There's Russell, you're not up to speed with this.
Yeah, I'm so sorry, I'm having difficulty hearing, so I think I can just speak up a little bit.
On vesting the road.
Excuse me, please, I'm sorry, but could you take your conversation out? It's terribly difficult to hear you, Lane. Sorry.
On vesting the road of Andy Sutherland back into the council. You up to speed with that?
Yeah, earlier background. Discussions have been had over a couple of meetings with Sutherland's in terms of Sutherland Road and the other road for vesting purposes. One of the previous points from council was that there was further discussions to be held to work towards the point of agreement. I have received further prompts from Elaine Sutherland, and I've passed those on to Tim as a writing matter for him to take up with Sutherland's, which may result in a further meeting to get to that point of agreement for the potential vesting. So I can check up on that in terms of whether Tim's had those recent discussions.
Yeah. But certainly I can comment that as mayor, I haven't received any information regarding accepting the negotiated agreement, which is one of the conditions.
Yep.
So nothing yet.
It's definitely aggressive. I think all we're down to is there's a little bit of land that needs to be sorted, which we will be given it, but we won't have paper of the survey to do that. So it's just getting down.
I'm good.
I've got a question about resolution 330 in terms of 110 East Street. Where are we any closer to getting it signed off by lawyers? I just by chance happened to be there yesterday on a completely different matter, and they mentioned that it was being held up with the lawyers.
I'll have to dig into that.
I'm sure there's just a process to go through. It's been approved from our side.
Yes.
It's just a matter of lawyers getting it through.
I think this is discussed with civil services. I mean, there's actually a write on. We've got one, this is one of many. And there's a piece of work that we actually need to do to set policy about how we respond to that.
Yes, that's right.
And so, again, that's something we need to do. But again, it's like that problem of resources and capacity, and it's actually unbudgeted, and it would cost us about $20,000 to do that work alone.
But that shouldn't impact on this
No,
decision being made.
but there's a bigger context.
Yes, and it was actually recommended by FAR that we have a policy.
Otherwise, we're just literally making a case-by-case decision. We need to have a policy about how we approach it properly. Yeah.
I think there are whole streets with 5 metre alienated berms and all sorts of stuff.
It's rampant in our great town.
Cool.
So it's on the
list. Yes.
Could I ask, right at the bottom, we need to, this is with regard to the Three Waters, we need to put in the delivery plan before the 30th of September. Harry, can you just say, is that on track for getting in on time? How far down the road are we on it?
We're 99% of the way there.
So that's being developed by Wellington Water, is that correct?
Exactly, that's right.
So will that
It's just our part, it's our part.
Yeah.
Will that come out?
And it's commented on in the agenda item.
Yeah. So I think the complexity is we need to dovetail that in with what the other councils are doing to get economies of scale.
Just a point on this, getting back to Harry's comments before the meeting, we've got to bear in mind that there is a lot of pressure on staff. And if these jobs, these actions aren't that important, you know, we've got to give them a little bit of a leeway here to get some of the important stuff done.
This one definitely is.
Yeah, that's part of the quality water.
Getting money, yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah, so it was signed last Friday, the MOU, and I can say that all the councils in the Wellington region have signed it. Definitely, I'm not sure if there are many councils that haven't. Interesting about that. Cool. So what, have we got Wellington Water now?
Shall
we talk to it?
Shall I give him the glasses?
I'll move on to the mayor's report. So as you can see,
perfect. Here we are.
We'll just finish the mayor's report then, since we started. Okay, if you take that as read, are there any questions you have of the mayor's report? I haven't included there the remits from the LG, Local Government New Zealand AGM, but all of them were passed pretty much unanimously. So there didn't seem to be any. And I think I will distribute those later this afternoon. There was an email with the minutes of the AGM to be distributed. So there was nothing really controversial.
No.
The Wood Aerodrome, as you can see, we have been invited. So we have someone sitting on the strategic advisory group, given that they have another $10 million from the government, with an additional $7 million that they're looking to spend over a 3-year period. With that in mind, I have suggested that Councillor West sit on that strategic advisory group. And so we have a moment to receive that report that I'm talking to. Speaking to Councillor Collins, all those in favour say aye. Aye. All those against, the motion is carried. So we'll just carry on. Do you have any questions about this? No. If not, then we'll just move straight on to proposal to, so recommendation to appoint Councillor West as the council's representative of the Marsden District Council Hood Aerodrome Strategic Advisory Group. We have a proposal, Councillor Plymouth, seconded, Councillor Hayden. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. All those against, motion is carried. Brenda, we're going to know more about airplanes than we really want.
Yeah.
Actually, most airports are property companies, they're not.
And my runway's got pig rooting all over it. Can we get that?
You've got a runway.
Oh, yes.
So now we'll move back then to D2. The wastewater treatment. So we've received the report. Yep. D2.
No.
Certainly, do have a move to receive the report, Councillor Plymouth, Councillor Vickery, all those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Those against, the motion is carried. So we have Ian and Jeremy. Jeremy.
So Jeremy is our GM for network management. Who has responsibility for treatment plants and all other things.
Okay, so if I could just introduce this item. So without any pun, a lot of water has gone under the bridge since we heard of this event. We're actually not certain there was an overflow. So that there's the other option that may have occurred is that the irrigators were doing what the irrigators do, but they were at a loading rate that would have been higher than the ground level, with a higher water table than you'd expect it to receive. So there's quite a possibility that the ponding that was seen was actually created by the irrigators themselves rather than overflow from the tertiary treatment ponds, which could equally explain why the day after we tested the warning signal worked, because if it didn't overtop, then the signal was actually working as properly. So there's still quite a bit of work to actually find out what's going on. But the fundamental problems were between a rock and a hard place. Because the way the system works is that If the river is in low flow, we're not allowed to discharge. So the only way we can manage the volume is by land irrigation. So we get a long and protracted dry period, which we have, then we will be breaching our consent conditions for loading rates from the irrigator, which could cause which pumping out and cause ponding as well. We actually have a fundamental problem with the design of the system. I've been chatting with Ewan about how we would resolve it. Is it a matter of getting more land area to irrigate so we've got better buffer? Is it more storage? But the other option is also the work that we're doing to reduce infiltration into the water, into the wastewater system itself. So I mean, obviously there's a percentage of the wastewater stream that will be infiltration from stormwater. To reduce the amount of stormwater reduces the amount of volume to be irrigated. So this is not a straightforward situation. It's about the fundamental design, particularly in a dry period where there's low river flow and we get a long dry period. So it's not an event in of itself, though there are things, and Ian will talk about how we improve that. But it is quite possible that the system actually worked as it's meant to work. But the problem is the fundamental design of the system is the contributor. Does that make sense, guys?
So we'll pass now to.
Yeah. So Ian, take it over.
Yeah, things a bit like the United Nations here today, but anyway.
Guys, but we also have a little bit hard of hearing.
Yeah.
So we'll try and get
that okay. And thanks for having us along again today. We had hoped to bring Gillian along, our treatment plants manager as well, but has had a COVID test on Monday and hasn't been cleared yet. So we will get her along at a later stage. I'm happy to do a briefing at some stage with her on video conference, or we can get her along when we have the incident investigation completed. The obvious area either way, whichever way we do it, would be good to get Gillian on to give you a bit more of an insight into some of the operational challenges that the team have. But anyway, just to kind of move on from what Harry was talking about there, we kicked off the investigation. We've got an independent person carrying out that investigation, and it appears to me on initial look at it that from an impact point of view, it has been minimal. There's been no known environmental or health impacts. But having said that, it is a kind of a warning, I guess, or a very near miss kind of a thing that points to wider, if you want, and that's the way we're looking at it. If that makes sense, I think I've talked to you guys quite a few times already about the system and the fragility of it, and the work we're doing and the program work we have to address that. It'd be fair to say it's a long march. We've taken, I guess, on board the recent incident and having had discussions with the Mayor and Harry and you last week or the week before around wanting to pick up the pace on the wastewater side of things. We've made quite a bit of progress on the water side of things, but probably on reflection, the wastewater has been a bit of a slower march, and that's been based on a priority thing as well, and risk. And if that makes sense. So the investigation, I guess, we'll share that with you when it comes through, but we'll let that run its course and see actually what it uncovers. To go back to the actual operation of the plant, one of the big things with it is the actual consent is complex, and it requires you, it means it does make the operation of the plant pretty difficult on top of the fragility. And one of the big things that we are doing is, we're engaging with GW to see and find a workable way, because, the case that happened a couple of weeks ago where we had, an unusual dry period in the middle of winter, but also because it was winter, the land might have wasn't optimal to discharge there either. And then when you add in other parameters like, the wind speed and all
those kind of things. It doesn't, we maybe actually set up the failing and said it might not be achievable, you know, in certain conditions. So we are working with GW on that. And I guess the other thing we're doing, as I said, we're wrapping up our wastewater improvement program, and so we're just going through the planning process of that to see how we can wrap it up over the next wee while. And we'll be able to share more detail with that when we've got that plan in place. And we've also kind of plugged gaps in resources or upped our resources. Jeremy, you want to have a chat about what we've done there?
Yeah, so, right. So we've brought over one of the senior folks from our regional wastewater contract, which is with the Aldi, so he's been helping out over there. We've also brought over one of our service delivery managers to concentrate, to free up the manager over there, Martin, so that he can concentrate on treatment. The manager from the Wellington side able to concentrate on the reticulation team, so yeah, it's certainly helped resource-wise and added some expertise.
Yeah, I guess so. If we look at the long term there, you know, the other thing we want to do, we want to have a little bit of think and a review of how we're actually set up over here, because you know we set this up, you know, based on a principle. We'll see in the paper there, you know, back in early 2019, that you know we would deliver the same level of service with no increase in costs. There's been a bit of a change in the guard since then, and you know, you guys have rightly signaled to us that you want to take a bit more, a much more proactive approach when it comes to lifting performance of these assets, and water being, you know, high priority for you guys. So we're going to have a look at that over the next week while to see that, you know, see that we're set up in the optimal way to actually deliver that level of service. And I think the time is right to do that with, you know, the water reform and everything happening. And so we'll engage with the council on that as well, you know, as we run through that. That makes sense. But rather than me talking away, you guys have some questions or?
Do we know how much stormwater is actually being diverted through the Martin Brown wastewater system?
I don't know. I know it's a bigger problem in Bedford than it is in Margaret, but I don't have that information to hand.
But that's part of the information we're going to, part of that information we're going to be looking at is one of our water system, which is on the next report, which is about how much leakage we have in the system and what we can do about that. But equally, we've got to be looking at the stormwater side into our wastewater system.
So one of the pieces of work we have in our program this year is to, you know, a lot of our information on the condition of the wastewater network, pipework, is based on age. So we want to do some condition assessments and some flow monitoring to actually get a gauge on the true condition, if you want. Makes sense.
Absolutely.
So was there a failure of the isolating valve? You mentioned in your report, but Harry thinks that it may not have been, or may have been overwatering.
Well, I guess that's why it's not that.
Sorry, speak a bit louder.
Sorry, it's not that clear. I guess what I want to do is let the investigation figure it out, because it seems to be a bit cloudy at the moment, and to reach a conclusion about exactly what's happened, and what we can learn from that, I guess.
Okay, there's a follow-on question probably for Harry. How old is this equipment, Harry? When was it restored?
About 5 years. About 5 years.
Because I'm just wondering if there's any warranty comebacks.
I think there's a couple of things there. One is there was an issue with regards to the watering system. Yeah. And I think we've addressed that. It may have been under warranty, I'm not sure. The question here is not on warranty, but from what I gather, there were climatic conditions that meant we were doomed to have this issue.
Just right up and just follow on from that. There were failures in earlier this year. In fact, there was potential failure in this one as well as the overwatering. That's why I raised the issue of warranties.
So it depends on, and that's the thing we don't know. So at first we thought it was the tertiary treatment ponds overtopping and that the valve, the warning didn't go off. Right. So which is the same valve. And so that was what we initially thought had happened. But then the following day, the valve, the emergency thing was working fine. Right? So the other option that presented was because there was so much ponding from the irrigators. It's not the irrigators weren't working, they were working fine. It's just the soil, the amount of water table was high, and the loading rates accumulated, which created ponding, which actually could have been the issue. But we don't know that. But then the issue is if it's not a mechanical failure, if it's not a system, it's actually the way the system works. So if you get a combination, if you think of what I've just described, if we are in a situation where we can't discharge to the river, because the river's in a low flow situation, if the amount of land that the irrigator goes on in a prolonged period and you've got a high water table, then we would be breaching our consent because they're overloading and they're ponding anyway.
Yeah, and to be fair, Harry, it won't even be the water table, it might be actually the actual condition of the land conditions, and we might have some learnings from that as well. So you're right, the evidence seems to be that there's been some ponding there, so you know there's something behind that.
So you've got something that's the system and the design of the system work, or it's actually the fundamental way the whole system works.
And I understand what you're saying, Harry, and I understand what you're saying. I think that you probably hit the nail on the head, that there's a lot of that we're hearing that no one knows yet. We need to wait for the investigation. Because it's all people, it's guesswork, and we need to actually do the investigation, so then we know what the facts are, so then we know how we can move forward.
And I think to that's a very good point. But what we have said is we're not going to hide anything. So immediately, Wellington Water, according to what the council wanted,
I'm happy with that.
There was a suspected link. And up to a point we got slammed for that. But what we're then going to do is not be issuing lots and lots of information to everyone until we actually know what the situation is. Okay, so that we're not going to do that. So we've hoisted our own petard by wanting to be transparent, but when we don't have the information, we don't make it sound worse than it is.
That's
so I still think we've done it right, but we can't have lots of people demanding information until the information is correct. So Councillor Fleming.
Thank you. Faults occur in infrastructure, that's given, but we've had a couple of faults here, and my concern is that we're possibly losing community belief that the system actually works. We've had two potentially serious issues. So how do we go back, and can you give us some confidence that the system does work, that we're not going to get false positives or false alarms? Because if we get a false alarm from the community perspective, that's as bad as actually having a fault anyway, because the panic's already out there, or the implication is already there. So that's
like it is a bit like transparency. I think is a good thing, it's the right thing to do, but it does come with a bit of pain, I guess, and it can't feel to public that it's falling apart, which isn't necessarily the case. It's like as I referred to at the start, it is a long march, but we want to be marching quickly to get the risk level, which is what we're talking about here, the risk level almost of the infrastructure down. We've made a lot of improvements, but we've got a lot more work to do, I guess, to get it to a place where we feel it's best practice or whatever.
Do we have our warning settings potentially wrong? Because of course both these incidents have come to the attention of the public because they're walking around. So maybe that's how it's coming out straight away on social media, and all of a sudden you've got where it's not only managing the issue, it's managing the perception as well, which is the most difficult thing to do.
So the sequence is you can't fix it too late. Don't have a And so as Pippa says, we've DTEC to find out what the problem is, because there may be is that instead of what we thought, it actually could be something else. So let's find out what they know, then we can fix it.
The other thing we want to do, Alistair, is work in a planned way. You know, so we don't want to do knee-jerk things and then it's regretted. Unless there's a clear and present danger there, you want to take a step back and say, okay, well, what's going to be right here for the long run, you know, and make, you know, no regrets investment decisions, because we don't want to find out in years time actually we backed ourselves into a corner there, you know, and we take the valve and the marker at the moment, you know, the right thing to do there is probably automate the valve, but we want to look at where the valve is and what function it provides in the wider system before we just go and automate. You know, we want to look at the control system. We want to look at is it a safe place to be operating? All those things, so that when we do it once it's automated, we do it for good. You know, that makes sense.
I agree with that. It's just public perception is still very fragile.
We're dealing with certain systems that were put in place, and the system is the system.
Oh, look, I agree with everything that's been said. It's about how do we manage this perception.
The other thing, it's managing the content, the other thing we have to do is we have to keep the file service 24/7. We can't just shut it off.
Can't shut it off.
Fix it.
So just one thing, you've highlighted the fact that our wastewater system is not coping and that we have to go into land at times. We're coming up to our dry season and Martinborough just absolutely blooms in summertime, where we, double, if not double and a half the population over near the weekends. So there's a great, and in fact it's happening already as well.
Double, like there's 1,600 people that live here and there's 5,000 in the weekends,
So I think I missed the question to start there.
So how do we have a plan for coping with the wastewater into our dry season? Yeah.
Like it is a fragile system, but it is sized for the tank. So you know there is a certain amount of storage there. So you know it can cope with those weekend peaks and those summer peaks. You know, and it's like anything. When you put a bit of stress on it, it does become more challenging to manage, but it, you know, it can be managed. I think. You know. Would that be fair to say, Jeremy?
I think the biggest issue, one of the things that wasn't raised around the setup and the detail is the shutdown that the irrigator has with wind. So the irrigation to land, which is part of the consent condition, is quite difficult to manage because of that very windy site. So yes, over summer there's going to be additional loading. And saying that we won't have the same level of I&I, the infiltration from the stormwater system. So I don't see that the summer peak loading from people will be the problem. But there will still be that issue with the river being low and us not being able to discharge into the river and relying on that irrigation to land. And you know, if we have a similar situation where we've got high winds, you know, it's like the only been windy for a couple of weeks leading up to that. And the ground release as well. So,
and the thing I'd say with all that, our initial discussions with Greater Wellington around these parameters, you know, they have been positive. So, you know, we want to sit down and talk to them in more detail about that and have plans in place that, you know, we've got a combination of X, Y, and Z. It's really clear what we need to do, you know, and so I'm reasonably optimistic we'll come to a good arrangement there.
So I spoke to Paul Gardner, who's our liaison into regional council in that consent space, and so I mean the conversation started about what we can do to manage it. So just see how that progresses, and we'll be looking at like what the timeframes are from when we sort of get into that situation where we can't discharge to the river, and when we might have a level issue in the storage. So.
Thanks, Jeremy. Councillor Eames.
Yeah, sorry, I think what you've inherited a dog, to be honest. This consent was that 2014. Yes. 2014 and consented in 2016. I've got the actual application here. And they talk about the II flow then of a maximum in in Martinborough of 3,000 cubes a day. We'd expect 370 cubes a day. So if they consented at that level, and we've had 5 or 6 years now of operation, and we still haven't beaten it, I think you guys have actually inherited a real dog at the end of the day, and I feel sorry for you. Because I think what's happening, we've got a consent that doesn't work. It actually doesn't work. Now the solution to that is exactly what you're saying. We need to find out why it's gone right from day one, from 2014. And these are the same consents through the whole district, except, thank God, for Featherston. So we're 10 times above what we should be putting through. And that's the figures from the previous consultant.
Yeah. To be honest, we're probably at the pointy end of why the government is. You're not alone, I think, in New Zealand. And you know, I'll take this council's credit, you're actually ahead now of where the councils are. So it's not, I'm a bit more grass half full, I guess, but anyway.
Well, I don't see a solution because we keep on apologising, that's my problem. And I take the point, after a while the community gets to the stage where they think, well, how many more are we going to have?
I think the probably important thing with that, Mayor, is probably that we need to get our comms right as well on communicating these things, you know, that we tell that story about, you know, we're being transparent, we want to do the right thing for the environment and public health and all those things, you know, all those good things. But it is challenging based on investment over a long period, you know.
So, Councillor Fox, you have a question?
I do, actually, thank you. Who is it from Veolia that's coming across to do a bit of a plant audit?
Derek. I can find out.
Thanks. Yeah, what I was interested to know about, not so much the individual, but what the experience of that individual is with dealing with rural plants, because of course they're really different to municipal plants. And I just wanted some assurances. I'm not saying that, you know, it's not all the same thing, because it is, but just that some of the weird idiosyncrasies that happen in small rural plants are really only known by small rural authorities and people that run them. So I was interested.
So I think the other thing I say, Rebecca, we've got a number of different resources doing different bits of the work. So we've actually got a health and safety expert looking at the health and safety aspects from our consultancy panel, who just has good experience of these rural plants.
I'm not so much.
It's not the one resource for everything.
The fundamental question we just need to get back on is have we got people who've got experience in these types of plants?
Thanks.
Doing the problem definition.
Level. Yeah. That's what I thought.
So what I'd say is, could you assure you and Stip, the officer, on the capabilities of the staff that are being employed?
Yeah, I just wanted to know.
Government's best
I wasn't casting anything over people's roles or responsibilities. It was just the need to understand who was actually involved from the regional kind of rural perspective. It's not about competencies or qualifications or anything like that. There's clearly there's a problem with the plant and the design, and there's obviously a problem with the consent. I'm really pleased to hear that you're talking to GW, and I'll be interested to hear how those conversations go. But just in terms of the overall plant, I'm going to call it a plant audit because that makes sense to most people. So if we're starting at the front end and ending up at the back end, what things are happening along the way, what's working, what's not working, and what the recommendations are in that. Because it just seems to me that what we don't have, and I thought that this had happened previously and maybe it didn't, we just don't have an overall view of that plant. And I'm picking that with this event, that's what we're trying to achieve.
Yeah, so there's a number of work streams in that regard, and a number of different aspects to it, you know. So as I was saying at the start, you know, once we get that fast track plan to a point, you know, I'm happy to share that with the council, you know, with you and you know, so that you can get some visibility on actually what the outputs are, I guess, and you know, what they're going to achieve.
I personally would like to see some more regular updates from you guys in that space, because there is a lot of community concern that comes at us. And sort of, we say we have to wait to the next council meeting, that's not always helpful. And I know there's also right times to share information and not, but that would be good. The other thing in terms of your reports, it's great that we've got them to look at, but the public are reading these reports as well. Could you please include some photographs in your reports, just pointing some things out? I know that probably seems really minor, but actually if you're trying to communicate a story and issues, pictures convey 1,000 words. So if you can include some of that in the reports, that would be neat. And just, I'm sorry, it's an operational question, but I'm going to ask it anyway. If we were looking at ponding of the irrigator being an issue for this most recent event, what did the telemetry tell us? Because we should be able to see whether the irrigator was actually operating at that time that would have led to a ponding event. Would that not have been one of the first? I'm not telling you how to do your job, but I'm just saying I feel the need to say that because to me that sticks out.
That's an obvious question we're already asking. What's happening in the investigation?
Look forward to the report.
Good, Councillor Gibson and Councillor Hay.
Pretty quick. I think, Rebecca, you've got amazing eyesight when you've been reading my notes because you've just asked. But getting back to the dog report, have you got someone that can actually, I guess this is what Rebecca's just asked, give you an overview and tell us whether the thing needs to be scrapped or can be fixed? I mean, because we continue getting these things. And just to back Harry's suggestion that it could be a combination of a ponding. Some of the locals have said they've never seen the river that low for that long in this time of the year, ever. And, you know, that means that you can't put water into there. And a lot of it was a result of the glacier, I guess. But I think, you know, climate change has probably got something to ask.
So to answer your first question there, you may have seen the paper we put up in June, but I guess 4 or 5 big work streams we have are, you know, review of the health and safety aspects of it. There's a process review, which is, you know, the process itself. There's the irrigation systems review, that's about the plants, right 10 on here. And then there's actually the plant procedures, which is, you know, the operation and maintenance manuals type of thing. So they're all in progress of what we're doing. What we're looking at doing is actually wrapping them up. Along with looking at the critical control points at the moment and any immediate things we want to do there to make the system more resilient. If all that makes sense. So that just kind of gives you a bit of a, you know, taste of what we're actually up to, if you like.
There was just one comment made by a couple of people in the public that they're very pleased that they're getting information about something that's going on. They would sooner see that information come out about it than hear it from the back room and not get it right. So, you know, that's one good thing that we are getting out there. And they'll accept it if we're up front with it.
Last question, Councillor Hay.
Yes, can you just clarify for me what a good outcome would be in discussions with you? So what do you
Well, I think it'd be very clear, if you take the guys on the ground, boots on the ground, that they know very clearly what they need to do in the myriad of circumstances, if you like, between the wind, the river, the ground conditions, you know, the pond levels, the flow coming in. It's really clear to them the decisions they need to make, you know, if that makes sense.
So would that take the form of a change the consent or a memorandum of understanding?
So it's probably going to be one or two things. So it'll either be a change to the management plans, which we have in the plant, or would be a change to conditions and consents. And that's what we'll engage on the moment. Can we just change the management plans, or do we actually need to alter consent conditions?
What's your sort of thinking on timeline for this? When that could be achieved?
I'm hoping it's not going to take too long. I would hope, you know, at least we get some, depending on the outcome of discussions with it. I don't want to preempt it very well. I'd imagine we'd have a good sense within the next few weeks about what the direction is, at least, you know, if it's a straightforward updating the management plans, or is it more, you know, changing consent, which might be a little bit more onerous.
Oh, so it seems that.
Thank you very much.
Very good, Josh.
The other thing, we're thinking of arranging an opportunity if councils do want to go out next week and just see the layout and actually see it on the ground. So we'll drop a note out to arrange an opportunity for people just to literally visit the plant. Dean doesn't know this. Just so you can see it. And to Rebecca's point about not having pictures and things is actually really, we need to do that better. But it's just, so for those who want to go and just see it firsthand, we will make an opportunity.
Right. If you guys want to stay there, then we'll move on to agenda item D3, which is the progress in detecting leakage report to inform council of the progress in detecting leakage from South Road District Council Water Networks. So do we have someone move someone to receive the water leak detection update report? Enzo, second, Councillor Jefferson, all those in favour, aye, say aye.
Aye.
Against, motion's carried. So we'll carry on, Mr. Wilson and Jeremy.
Just really quickly, this follows on from when I came over here with Colin recently, and we had a bit of a chat about the end of year performance report. And it's just really giving you guys a bit more insight and visibility on the high demand stroke leakage in the system. So like it's as simple as that. I think that a couple of things I just point out, that it may look, with these networks, they're not big, a couple of leaks can make the data look really bad, I guess, the percentages, because they are smaller networks. Probably the other thing to point out, that we do run a leak detection program, and which finds the leaks on the public side. And the good tool we have here, I guess, in South Rapids is we do have meters on properties, but they're only read once a year, so that's how we pick up the leaks on the private side, if you like. And the trial we want to run as part of one of the projects in the water reform money. It's going to be interesting what we can, when we set that up, what we're going to find out and how successful that's going to be, I guess.
Next question, Councillor Gibson.
Yes, just on this leaking and the thought around smart meters, I guess, Harry, might be a question for you. Are we able to do a trial in a certain area with smart meters and just see the benefit we can get from it?
So we are replacing, we're in short, what the council decided previously was to do a very slow rollout of smart meters. And so it was literally when a new connection occurred, we suddenly had to replace it. So one of the things you should be considering in the long-term plan is actually because you're looking at a water conservation plan, the ability to meter private use is a really good thing to do. But bear in mind the technology of the smart meter right now, and I'm no expert on this, but it's still a drive-by check. So you still have to, it's not like you can actually get it. There is technology that allows you to have an app, but it's not in general use right now. So, the other balance in that is that's the ideal, is to have that technology where people can monitor their own use in an app, but very similar like you do with household electricity generation. But my understanding, Ian, you might put Jeremy, is that that's still not an easy and cheap technology right now. Is that correct?
It's probably at the moment just internationally there's one or two schools of thought of the best way to go about managing leaks. Number one is you put smart meters on every property. The other way you can do is you put small area meters in and manage it that way. And then I guess part of what we're going to be doing with this project, so we're going to do one trial over here, one trial in the hut. And so, out of that, we'll maybe get some, as to our networks, what's going to work best. That makes sense.
Okay,
So councillor M.
yeah, just a quick one. In the notes, there's a comment there about smart meters in rural properties.
That's an efficiency thing, so, you know, because they're generally more difficult to read, and they can just drive by and read it.
No, most rural properties have their own water supply.
It's obviously the properties that, maybe it's the terminology, but it's the properties that are, you know, not connected, they're on town supply, so.
Yeah.
Lifestyle.
Maybe semi-rural.
Paying farmers on town supply, but there's 1.4 k's out of town.
And quite a few of the wineries are actually on town supply as well.
But the crucial thing here is we need to get on top of our water leakage. We're asking people to conserve water. We've got to make sure that the public aspect of that is managed. Yep. So we're fortunate we can use
Councillor Glenzo.
Sorry, Ian, I've got about 3 or 4 questions.
That's all right.
Okay, the first one is around the leaking problem, and specifically in this case around the Martinborough one. I presume that percentages you've given us is basically on an annual percentage, over an annual percentage rather than a monthly percentage. And so during this last 12 months, we've done an enormously amount of flushing of the Martinborough system. Now that water is potable water, it's not metered. And so I'm asking the question, have you taken that into consideration? Because that will be an awful lot of water that we knew we were wasting, but it's going to end up in your leakage.
Yes, so the measures, you know, that are in the that we provide in the performance report, they are quite crude, you know, they measure it. Obviously, that will work, you know. But I guess, you know, part of what we'll do with these trials is actually get smarter information on where the water is going, so to speak, you know. And but you make a good point, you know, with all the fishing, what you use to test out the water. It is over a year, obviously, the year-end report, based on the data for the 12 months. So, does that answer your question?
Sort of, yeah.
Sorry.
Secondly, you talk about reading the meters. Every meter that we've got in town at the moment through the whole district is able to be read by the householder. So surely some comms around that and their ability to monitor their own water usage would maybe alleviate some of that. So if they check that on a, you know, comms go out checklist to make sure there's no leakages on your personal property, so that you don't get a bill at the end of the 12 months. And that would help with monitoring private property leakages. And then the other thing is, what is the cost of these smart meters, these new ones that you talk about?
I don't have that information, and to be honest, I know we can find out if you want. We can find out too.
And then you talk about doing a pilot or a trial. I know you talk about rural, but where are you looking to do the trial? Which town are you looking
I think the intention was to do it in Greytown.
Cool, thank you.
the beer is just to make a restaurant look.
Oh, you're the chair.
Oh,
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean,
any other questions around the table, team?
Oh.
Go for it.
I think it's great to use the funding to do a full sweep of leakage, or looking at leakage in one town. I don't think historically that has been done. It's sort of been one street in each town per year, not as opposed to historically, as opposed to being able to have a good solid look. It's great. My question is actually around, if we detect a leak that is inside the property boundary, of course that is an issue for the property owner, and they can take incredibly long period of time before they may rehabilitate that. And I'm aware of some that have taken over a year to fix that. What instrument could we use as part of our water conservation strategy that we could have that leak repaired and then charge it as a rating on the property owner?
I can't answer, but that's a very good idea.
Okay.
But I think
You are going to have to look at that whole waiver policy, all that type of thing, and whether we've got the legal rights to enter the property to do that. I'm not sure we turn off the valve.
We're not allowed to do that by law either.
I know, particularly if someone's elderly.
Yeah.
I don't think it's as straightforward.
Harry, just answered Rebecca's question. When the meters first went in, that was done, and I can't remember the events and that, but they were given time to fix it. If people had financial issues and they couldn't repair it, the council did it, and I think if they repaid it back, look, it'd be worth checking out the details.
The only way we can control that is by law.
Yeah.
And so we'll just have to leave it. I just don't know.
Just advising of the leak may be enough.
Councillor
Hay and then Councillor Newsom.
I think some of my questions have been answered, but just thinking about neighbourhood water meters rather than individual ones, have you had any feedback on how efficient it is in monitoring water leakage?
Well, it's funny, we just put our first few in our project. It's probably a bit early to tell. So I'll be interested to see what comes out of that,
How might you compare that neighbourhood meter in terms of accuracy? How would you compare that for accuracy of doing a neighbourhood water meter, like you're doing an Upper Hutt versus individual houses?
Well, I guess that's one of the things we want to glean from our trials, to see which is going to be more effective on our networks, And so we put them in, like if you take the small area meters, you put them in on a range of different types of pipe work and age, just to see what the data looks like. We literally only have it in a couple of weeks, so it's a bit early to tell.
So that would act like a grid system, so effectively you could go to certain parts of the grid in the system that were performing poorly or less. So that could be a more cost-effective way.
Yeah, like I think that could be
Absolutely.
Just with regards to it, we do actually have a policy about water leakages. So I'm just wondering whether that, with regards to the question that you were posing, does that council have the ability to actually charge people for overuse of water?
I think it's something to do. So
we do.
So we do.
We do.
We can charge. But the question was, do we have the ability to intervene to actually turn it ultimately like this is different. So I don't know.
We want to get away from charge.
Oh, absolutely.
So you say, Brenda, can we fix and then back charge?
Well, I would not want to do that.
No.
That's our current policy.
The conflict between the public and council officers, that's all raising a charge.
Alex, you just said fixing it, identifying the leak could be more beneficial to us than actually having to charge people to get it fixed.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, the thing I would say, though, you've got that volumetric charge over once you get over a certain limit here, so like there is an incentive to actually get your leak fixed here, as against, what we have the other side of the hill where there's no individual meters and you've got to, persuade people that's the right thing to do, so, and when you're actually getting charged for the water, it starts to focus most people, the majority of people's minds, you're always going to get a couple of difficult customers, that's part of life.
Right, guys, do we have any other questions?
That's a good report.
Yeah, thank you very much. Great to see you.
Thank you.
I think that is it. Do we have any further business? Which is, I declare the meeting closed. Thank you very much.